Well, we are here with my man, James Clear. Didn't mean to make that rhyme. I want to start with this real quick. I've been following you on Twitter for a while. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it was like Naval Ravikant, somebody that I started following through Tim Ferriss retweeted your pinned tweet.
Yeah.
Habits that have a high rate of return in life. Sleep 8+ hours each day. Lift weights 3 times a week. Go for a walk each day. Save at least 10% of your income. Read every day. Drink more water and less of everything else. Leave your phone in another room while you work. It's fucking powerful. I mean, it's
you
really
actually
powerful.
did all that stuff, right? But what's crazy is no single one of those is actually that hard, right? Those are kind of the habits that I like to focus on, or ones that are like fairly easy to implement, but have like a lot of leverage, you know? Like you just do these little things, they end up compounding over time.
Yeah, you get the most bang for your buck out of that. And it's, you know, I've been into biohacking, for lack of a better term, but really like, how do we hack life? Well, that usually comes down to how do I get the most bang for my buck in the shortest amount of time?
Right.
So if I had to choose between a cold bath versus a sauna, I'll do a 3-minute cold bath instead of an hour-long sauna session. And it's not going to equate to the exact same thing because they're 2 different elements, but
similar benefits. Plus you get 57 extra minutes of
exactly,
life. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and you touched on a point here. I just got to skim through your Bound Galley book, and you just dropped me off this gorgeous, let's see if we can show that for the camera here, Atomic Habits, which will release, when will it release? It's going to release, we're going to release
October 16th.
On the 16th. All right, great. So we've pushed you ahead of all the other guests to come out Monday before the 16th.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem, man. We're stoked to have you on. So you'll be on the 8th, October 8th. This podcast is going to air. But in flipping through, looking at the chapters, I do pride myself on being able to read authors' books before I have them on. Haven't had that chance yet. But you talk about like, make it easy.
Yeah.
In that. Can you break that down?
So in the book, I break down a habit into kind of 4 quadrants or 4 stages. And actually, you could probably look at most human behaviors this way, not just habits. So if you map out human behaviors on a spectrum, so something you do once is just an individual behavior. And then the more you do it, you do it 100 times or 500 times, then it becomes more habitual. And then maybe at the real far extreme end of the spectrum are like addictions or things that you can't even stop doing. But pretty much any behavior falls into these 4 quadrants. And so the third quadrant is make it easy. And so these are what I call the 4 laws of behavior change in the book. And they're kind of like 4 different levers that you can pull for making habits easier to stick with or making bad habits less likely to occur. And make it easy is all about friction. Like a lot of the behaviors that we perform, we either do or don't do them because of the amount of friction involved. And if you can adjust the amount of friction associated with any particular habit, you're more or less likely to fall into it. So let me give you 2 examples. So just a really simple one, like flossing. For a long time, I would brush my teeth twice a day, but I wouldn't floss consistently. And I realized there were 2 main issues. One was the floss was hidden away in the drawer in the bathroom, so I just wouldn't see it half the time, wouldn't think about it. The other issue sounds kind of weird and stupid, but I didn't like the feeling of wrapping the floss around my finger. And so there's just like a little bit of friction associated with it. So I bought some of the pre-made flossers and got a little bowl and put it right next to the toothbrush and then put the flossers in there, brush my teeth, put the toothbrush down, pick the flosser up, done. That was pretty much all I needed to change. And now I've been doing that twice a day for years. On the other side, take like too much screen time or watching TV. A lot of people will feel like they get home and watch too much TV or whatever. But if you walk into pretty much any living room in America, where do all the couches and chairs face? They all face the television. So it's like, what is that room designed to get you to do? It's the lowest friction, easiest, most obvious behavior in that room. So if you just redesign the space, you have a couple options. Like you could take a chair and turn it away from the TV, so you're less likely to see it. Take the remote control, put it in a drawer. Take the television, put it inside a wall unit or cabinet, so it's behind doors, less likely to see it. But you could also increase the friction associated with the task. So you could like take the batteries out of the remote control so that it takes 5 or 10 seconds more to turn it on. And you can ask yourself, do I really want to do this or am I just turning it on mindlessly? Or you could unplug the TV and only plug it back in if you can say the name of the show that you want to watch. So you can't just like mindlessly turn Netflix on and find something. If you really want to be extreme about it, you could take the TV off the wall, put it in the closet, and then only take it out when you want to watch something that bad. I have one reader who they decided that her husband loved watching, whatever the big game was, but he was watching stuff so much that they were like, well, let's just get rid of the TV. And if we want to watch the game enough to drive 15 minutes down the road to the bar, then we'll watch it there. If we don't actually want to put 15 minutes of work in to watch the game, we don't really want to watch it. But the point here is just to increase the number of steps between you and the bad behaviors and reduce the number of steps between you and the good ones. And what you find is that the lowest friction task is often the one you fall into. I mean, just take like phones, I have this thing, you just mentioned those high rate of return habits. So I try to keep my phone in another room outside of my office each day before lunch. So I get like a 4-hour block where at least I can do some work. I have a home office. It's not far away. It's, I only need to walk up the stairs like 45 seconds if I want to go get it. But what's funny is if the phone is next to me, I'll check it like every 3 minutes. But if it's out of the room, I'll never walk upstairs to get it. So it's like it was never worth 45 seconds of work, but I was doing it all the time anyway. And you find this with a lot of habits that if you just increase the friction a little bit, they'll fade away. It's not true for actual addictions, but for a lot of our bad behaviors, if we can just cut it off at the source or increase the friction, then they'll fade away without much extra work. Yeah,
I love it. You touched on so many good things there. My wife and I did a psilocybin mushroom ceremony, and she saw that we didn't have a TV because we have a 3-year-old son, and he was like, 2 at the time, and he was addicted to TV already. Anytime he'd walk by it, he'd say, "Mom, watch TV, Mom, watch TV," and he'd get all
Isn't it crazy?
Pissed. Yeah,
it's like crack for little kids. They see the screen and they can't look away.
Fuck, man. Like we can hide the iPad. We have the computer in a different room, those kind of things. And so we ended up giving the TV away to a friend, and now we just bring out the iMac if we want to watch a UFC or if we want to have movie night or something like that. But it's planned. It's like, oh, I want to watch, Joe Rogan's new comedy special. It's out on Netflix right now. So we'll set aside the time to do that. But it's never this thing where you walk by it and talking about how the seating arrangement just fucking is absorbed by the television. It's crazy. I remember when I was a kid walking in and if somebody had enough wealth to have two, like a living room and a family room, generally you'd have the living room with everything facing the TV, and the family room would have 2 couches or more facing one another with like a coffee table in between. And I remember walking in those rooms as a kid thinking like, this is the dumbest fucking room on the planet. Who would want to sit across from one another with a fucking tea in front of them? Like, this is stupid. And I remember parents telling me every time like, no, this is really cool. Like when you get older, you're going to want to have conversations with people, and it's nice to not have distractions. It's nice to not have TV in the room, and you can just really get involved in the conversation with whoever you have over. It's important, especially as you get older. And I never got that, but now that's the exact setup of our living room without the TV. We've set up a bed across with different things behind it, and then of course the couch. And it just makes it easier then to draw into that good habit of engaging with whoever's over.
I think the key is it's not that any of this stuff is bad or evil. It's just that you want to do it more mindfully rather than have it pull you in. So many of the technologies that we're surrounded by now are so frictionless. They're so convenient that you'll do them without even thinking about it. So it's just about like designing a more conscious environment. And any one of those changes is not going to like radically transform your life. But imagine the cumulative effect of living or working in an environment where you've got like 100 of those little choices that are all kind of nudging you in the right direction. Another stupid little one for me, I've noticed that if I get beer and I put it in the fridge and it's at the front of the fridge where I can just see it as soon as I open the door, I'll drink one every night just because it's there. But if I get a 6-pack and put it in the back of the fridge underneath like the lowest shelf so that I can't see it right when I open the door, sometimes it'll sit there for like a month. I'm like, well, did I really want a beer or not? Like it's in many ways, our choices are just driven by what is available and obvious to us. And so if you can make the right things more obvious and more frictionless, then you're more likely to fall into those behaviors.
This is excellent because I think it gives such an easy approach to how we change. I remember reading The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and he talked about, a lot of the science, the neuroscience behind how our brain wants to form habits. That way it doesn't have to think as hard moving forward because the brain is so taxing on the body's energy resources, right? It takes a lot to learn something for the first time. By the time you've done that 100 times, your brain's on autopilot. It's not working very hard to complete that task, right?
Right.
So his theory is that you cannot just squash a habit and never do it again. You have to change the habit, right? But that's also kind of loosely implied on how you change the habit. And I think he goes through this concept of a mom who's overworked and doesn't have enough time to make dinner each night. So one night a week, she takes her kids to McDonald's, and that quickly becomes 3 nights a week. And then to break that habit, she can't just say, all right, we're going to absolutely cook dinner each night. She has to change that to maybe a healthier option. Like we're going to go to Whole Foods hot food bar. Or we're going to go to Chipotle on those nights, and we'll eat something that's a higher food quality.
Right. Yeah. So I think we actually have like 3 options for breaking bad habits. So the first option is to reduce exposure. So something like, if you want to stop spending so much money on electronics, then don't follow all the latest tech review blogs. Or if you want to lose weight, don't follow a bunch of food bloggers on Instagram. You're constantly being triggered by that and having to like overcome the prompts. Now, that doesn't always work, but if you can cut a habit off at the source, then a lot of the time, like the craving won't arise naturally. So in Atomic Habits in the book, I talk a little bit about this woman who she smoked while she was in college, and she would always smoke while riding horses with a friend. And so eventually at some point she quit smoking, and she's also stopped, like seeing that friend and graduated from college and so on, wasn't riding horses. And then like 10 years later, she got back on a horse for the first time and suddenly craved a cigarette. And she was like, what is going on here? And your habits are often tied to a context. They're tied to a situation or some kind of cue. And so if you can reduce exposure to that cue, then in many cases, the craving won't arise. So that's the first option for breaking a bad habit. The second option, which kind of sucks, but is like to sit with the craving long enough to like let this wave of desire ride itself out. And so you basically just resist temptation. It's possible. It's easier if your hand is forced, if you use what I call a commitment device. So brief story real quick. Victor Hugo, famous author who wrote like Hunchback of Notre Dame and a bunch of other things. Well, when he got the book deal for Hunchback of Notre Dame, he just procrastinated for like a year. He hosted a bunch of house parties, has friends over. He went traveling for a little while.
He was balling.
He got the book deal and he did nothing, no work. And eventually his publisher got pissed off. They were like, can you please like actually work on this? And so they set this ultimatum for him. And they said, we're gonna cancel the book in 6 months if you don't have it done by then. And so he got his assistant to come in, put all his clothes into a chest, and they locked him up and took him out of the house. And the only thing he was left with was like this shawl, this like large robe. So basically he had no clothes that were suitable for hosting guests or for leaving the house or like going on trips or anything else. So he more or less put himself on house arrest. And what ended up happening was each time procrastination arose, he was able to kind of sit with that feeling and let it ride because he didn't really have many other options. And then he'd get back to work on the book. And it ended up working. He got the book done like 2 weeks early. But things like that where you can lock in your future action, and it becomes really hard to go to your friend's party or go out to, travel to a different place or whatever, just because you don't have the option. If you can increase the friction, then sometimes you can sit with the craving of a bad habit and let it ride out. So that's your second choice. And then the third choice is the one that you just mentioned, which is you take the solution that the bad habit is providing, the way that it's serving you, and you find a new behavior that delivers that same outcome. So one way to think about habits is that they are the solutions to the recurring problems that you face in life. So, in a sense, if you put your shoe on, your shoe is untied, that's a problem that you need to figure out, right? And so at some point, the first time, maybe that requires some effort, but once you tie your shoes 100 or 500 times, you can pretty much automate that solution and do it on autopilot. The same is true for pretty much every area of life, right? Like if you come home from work and you're stressed and exhausted, that's a problem that you need to figure out. But there are a variety of solutions that could solve it. You could play video games for an hour. You could smoke a cigarette. You could go for a run for 20 minutes. You could meditate for 10 minutes. And any of those solutions, whatever one that you come into, your brain starts to fall into that. Like the mom who's going to McDonald's, where she's like, I have a problem. I need to feed my kids. It's 5:30. And McDonald's is now a solution. And you're like, hey, this was easy. I should just automate the solution as much as I can. And so the key is to try to find a solution that delivers the same outcome, that solves the same problem, but is also about as convenient as the previous one. Otherwise, it's really hard because then you're trying to opt for a less convenient solution, and the brain doesn't want to do that. It wants to automate and conserve energy, not spend more energy.
That makes a ton of sense. To your second solution, being able to sit with it, I think that's what is so critical. And you hear about this in books like The Obstacle is the Way and other books similar that nature, where when you're able to face certain challenges consistently and sit with those challenges like an ice bath or an extended water fast. In those experiences, they can be extrapolated out to all experiences.
Yes.
Right. So like if I can go without food, which is one of the most primal messages my brain will tell my body, like, oh, I'm hungry, especially because it's around us 24/7.
Right.
And we're inundated with ads and smells and all these things. But if I can figure out a way to carve out a 4-day block of water only, that gives me strength going into all sorts of other things that are going to come up for me.
Intermittent fasting is funny that way. I've been doing it for like, 7 or 8 years now. And there are a lot of solutions that sound really easy at first, but then are actually hard to implement, it's like, just do P90X or do Insanity and you'll get fit. And people are like, oh yeah, all right, I get really motivated. And then it's like they fall off course after like 2 weeks or whatever. Intermittent fasting is like the opposite. It's hard for people to wrap their head around it at first. They're like, what do you mean? I don't eat breakfast? It's like very difficult for them to get over that because we've been conditioned that way. But then it's actually really easy to do. Like you don't do anything. You just don't eat. You just go to work, like just get started. There's no action to take. So I don't know. I need like a phrase for things like that. But it is nice that what I've noticed is just small benefit that has nothing to do with fasting itself is that it does translate to other areas. It's like, no, I don't need the meal. Like I was flying yesterday and it's like, well, I don't need to eat any of the crap food that's in the airport, Like,
they only got shit peanuts.
It's fine. It's going to be 6 hours. I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like it's not a big deal.
You're not going to die.
Yeah. I remember thinking the same thing. I played baseball all the way through college and like many sports, we had this kind of like hell week in the beginning where, training, conditioning, and everything before the season starts. And, I remember doing that in the morning. It started at like 6 a.m. and then, we got done and I was in class at like, 9 or something. And we had a test and everybody was freaking out. And I was like, this is so stupid to be worried about this. Like what I just did to my body 2 hours ago or 3 hours ago was so much harder than whatever this quiz is going to be. It just helps like recalibrate your mind a little bit. I think that's one reason. I've spent the last couple of years writing about habits and thinking about the stuff, researching the science, and like really working mentally difficultly. But what I've noticed is that I need the physical outlet too, because I don't think that if you only push yourself mentally, I don't think you get the full effect. I think you need both. And there's something about pushing yourself physically that strengthens yourself mentally and also helps you just keep perspective and recalibrate on all the other stuff that you face in life. It helps you put things in their proper place. You realize that, most of the things you're worried about are not actually that big of a deal.
Yeah. And we have so many challenges now that we bring upon ourselves because there's a scarcity of actual real world challenges, right? So we have like in the past, maybe we had to run from another predator because we weren't the highest thing on the food chain. Maybe we had food scarcity where we would it was feast and famine. We had periods of eating aplenty and then periods of no food at all. Let's find decent water supply to get by. Now we don't have that. We don't even have to battle the temperature, right? Everything's climate controlled.
Yeah.
We don't have to deal with summer heat. Like when I went to school at Arizona State and you go from the air-conditioned car to the air-conditioned classroom to the air-conditioned car to the air-conditioned house. Like you're never really dealing with the heat for more than 30 seconds walking in a parking lot.
If you think about air conditioning, it's crazy that is like a standard for most of the Western world now. It's just like, it's not normal at all. There's nothing normal about it to be able to set the exact weather that you live in all day long.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So we often have to choose those challenges, right? And I think if we are mindful of the choices we make, we can create habits that are going to build up our life. They're going to help us deal with real stress when it does come, as opposed to let me try to sugarcoat and put myself in this candy-ass bubble that makes everything perfect all the time.
I think I talk about my story a little bit in the introduction to the book, but my parents, when they were my age, they had 3 kids. My sister was 3 years old and had cancer. They had a house that, they were dealing with all this stuff at once. So occasionally, and this is true for everybody, if you live long enough, life will come for you at some point, right? Like something's going to happen. So occasionally life will stress you. But when life doesn't challenge you, I think it's important to challenge yourself, because otherwise you're just living in this optimal environment, air conditioning, and everything else is super easy. You can get all the information in the world at your fingertips. You never have to if you think about how crazy just eating is in the modern world. So previously, when we lived in tribes, you had to expend energy to get calories. At a minimum, you were foraging for berries, but otherwise you probably had to run something down and kill it, or part of a group hunt, or all kinds of other things. Now you can get calories without expending any. All you have to do is just tap Uber Eats on your phone or something, and it'll show up at your door. and you can just sit on the couch, which is, of course, like a recipe for poor health, but also just the game has completely changed now. We've transcended a lot of our evolutionary programming and natural situations. And so you need to be careful about designing that to serve you rather than to work against you, because it can very easily nudge you in the other direction.
Yeah, I think it was Tom Segura in his latest comedy special on Netflix that was talking about how there's an option when you go through the drive-thru at In-N-Out to eat in your car. And how embarrassing that is. Like, I'm a fat, pathetic loser. I'm going to eat this on my lap in the parking lot. And they're like, here's extra napkins. That kind of shit as you're leaving in shame to go find a parking space and eat in your car. You don't even want to get out of your car to eat.
Think about the visual of sitting in your car, right? I mean, if you just could look at it from the profile view, the human is not moving at all, right? So we just get this vehicle to shuttle us around across the streets, pull in, someone hands us food, we eat it, we'd go back to our plate. We've never moved from the sitting position. It's definitely not a natural way to capture and consume calories.
So what else do we have here in terms of the low-hanging fruit that pays the most back in return? And I think I don't know if this is exactly the correct science or math on this, but 20% that equals, you do the 20% that equals 80% of the return, right?
Yeah, Pareto principle, where are the highest points of leverage there. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about making habits obvious. That's one way to redesign your environment, make it easier to do the right thing. We talked a little bit about reducing the friction associated with a habit and making it easier. So two other key areas that I cover in the book are making habits attractive and making them satisfying. So let's talk about both of those. So the first thing is that every habit is preceded by a prediction. Every behavior is preceded by a prediction. It sounds kind of weird because we often think life is reactive, but actually in many ways it's predictive. So if you buy a book, if you buy Atomic Habits, you aren't actually buying the book. And what I mean by that is you can't, because you don't have it yet. So what you're buying is the image that the book creates in your mind. You're buying your expectation of the book. Same is true for any product you buy online, right? You can't, if you buy a trampoline on Amazon or something, you're not actually buying the thing. It isn't with you yet. You're buying the picture of it. You're buying the sales page. And so the key lesson here, and this is true for all of human behavior, is perceived value motivates action. Actual value motivates repetition. So the perceived value of the product motivates you to act the first time. Whether you find it attractive or not is what gets you to take action. Now, whether you enjoy it, whether you find it satisfying, the actual value, that's what gets you to return the next time and try it again. So in that way, making habits attractive is key for getting them to stick. And there are a variety of ways we can talk about doing this, but I'll just focus on one for right now. So one way to make a habit attractive is with the social environment. We are all parts of multiple tribes. So some of the tribes that we're a part of are big, like to be American or to be Australian or to be French or whatever. Some of them are small, like what it means to be a neighbor on your street or a member of your local CrossFit gym or someone who volunteers at a local organization or whatever. But all of these tribes, large and small, have a set of shared expectations that are part of them, like a set of shared behaviors. And just take a couple, common human habits. Like you walk on an elevator, and when you get on, everybody turns around to face the front. Or if you have a job interview, you wear a suit and a tie or a dress or something nice. There's no reason that it has to be that way. You could face the back of the elevator, you could wear a bathing suit to a job interview, but we don't do that because it violates the shared expectations of that tribe, of that group. And so the lesson here is that when habits go with the grain of the expectations of the tribe, when they go with the grain of the group, they're very attractive. When they go against the grain of the tribe, they're very unattractive. And so the perceived value of a particular action, how much you think it's going to get you and whether you're motivated to do it, is often contingent on who you're surrounded by. And so the punchline for building better habits is you want to join a group where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. Because if it's normal there, then suddenly it becomes very attractive. It doesn't go against the grain of the people that are around you. For many people, getting in shape and going to the gym, it feels like a lot at first. It feels like they feel uncomfortable, they feel out of place. But there are tons of people who going to the gym 4 days a week is just normal. It's not a sacrifice. It's just what they do. And if you can surround yourself with people like that, then it becomes much more normal for you to see it as a common action as well. The other thing here is that if the option is I have to leave my current tribe to do the habit that I want to do and be on my own, or I get to stay with my tribe and not do the habits I want to do, we would often rather be wrong with the crowd than right by ourselves. If the option is loneliness or better behavior, loneliness or worse behavior, we'd often choose the worst behavior and not be lonely. So in many ways, asking people to change their habits is actually asking them to change their tribe. And it's a lot easier if you have a new tribe to go to, if you have someone else to hang out with, a new place to become a part of. So it's important to try to find that group. And I think one way to do that, the process of changing tribes is never easy, but one way to make it easier is to join a group where the desired behavior is a normal behavior and you already have something else in common with the group. So the example I always give for this is my friend Steve Cam. He runs Nerd Fitness, which is it's this website about getting in shape, but it's specifically organized for nerds, for people who love Batman and Star Wars and Legos and all kinds of stuff like that. And so if you show up there, you still might feel uncomfortable going to the gym for the first time, but you can connect with everybody over like your mutual love of Star Wars or something. And so it's like, hey, we're already friends, and they work out 3 days a week, so I could probably do that too. So if you can find that like shared context, that mutually beneficial areas of interest, then you can become friends over that stuff, and then you can start to adopt the new habits, because it's really belonging that makes you want to stick with the habits of the tribe. If you don't belong, if you're not friends with them, then you're probably not going to take on the habits of that new tribe.
Yeah, and it won't stick, right?
Right.
There's, I forget how to word this exactly, but the crabs in a bucket scenario.
What is it? I don't know.
Well, no crab will ever make its way out of the bucket, because if it makes its way to the top, all the crabs trying to get out will pull that crab back down and try to shuffle, right? And that's true of a lot of scenarios, especially if you're trying to get in shape and your significant other is not on board, because now you're surrounded with shit food and tasty desserts, and you're finding an uphill battle, right? And a lot of people take whatever is standard as their own identity. So this is the way that I've always lived. We've always had dessert. We've always done X, Y, and Z. And now you're trying to do A, B, and C. And that frightens me, because you're not the person I married, or you're not the friend that I grew up with, right? So it's challenging their own identity in what they perceive as their identity, because now you're starting to make waves and go a different direction. Are we going to grow apart? Are things going to change? And there's often a lot of fear based around the unknown. Like, who will I find? I don't know who I'll find. I don't know what that other group looks like. I don't know what the other bucket is. Right? So, and I've had a number of friends, a good buddy of mine who lives here in Austin, retired CrossFit guy, looks great, totally jacked. And he has a summer home in Idaho. And, last year he's having fun. He's golfing every day, drinking a lot. We do some work on the consciousness side of things with plant medicine. And he shows up this year with 20 pounds less muscle. He's more into mobility, yoga, breath work, meditation. Also not drinks. He's not drinking at all. He doesn't drink the entire summer, right? So that went against the grain so much with those people that everyone was asking about it. Everyone was asking his wife about it, which was a concern for her. It's like, I'm tired of answering all these people. What's going on with you, right? Yeah. So there are uphill battles, but if you understand that the juice is worth the squeeze, like then it makes it okay. Like I can go into this thing that's a little scary, it's a little unknown. And in doing that, I will find, it's not like The Secret, but I will attract those people into my life that make sense to me, that are on the same path, that are working towards the same goals that I have.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's true for businesses too. Like ultimately your brand is the work that you do. You can say it's whatever slogan or tagline, but what the actual experience is, the product you create, that's what the real brand is. And that attracts a certain type of customer. Same thing is true for individuals. Like the way you live your life, the things you do attract or push away certain types of people. And so if you want to find that tribe, one way to do that is to be it. And then, it'll naturally start to gravitate that way. But I'm glad you bring up identity, because this is something I talk about in the second chapter of the book. And I think it's really crucial. And it's actually like the ultimate reason that habits really matter. So here's the way that I would describe it. Your habits are how you embody a particular identity. So every day that you make your bed, you embody the identity of someone who is clean and organized. Every day that you go to the gym, you embody the identity of someone who is fit. Every day you sit down and write a sentence, you embody the identity of someone who is a writer. And so in a sense, your habits are, it's like every action you take is a vote for the type of person that you think that you are. And as you cast more votes for that particular type of identity, it's like the evidence builds up and you start to believe it about yourself. If you kick like a soccer ball one time, you don't think you're a soccer player. But if you show up every afternoon at soccer practice and kick a ball around, you do this for 3 months or 6 months or a year or whatever, at some point you kind of cross this invisible threshold and you're like, hey, I guess I'm a soccer player. Same thing is true for any habit. And so in that sense, your habits create or build up evidence of your identity. And eventually the things that you believe about yourself are reinforced by the actions that you take. And the weird thing is that once you start to adopt a particular identity, this becomes a two-way street, because then your belief about yourself becomes a reason to do it again. You go to church every Sunday for 20 years, and then you think, oh, I guess I'm religious. And then you're like, well, because I'm religious, I need to go to church next week. And the same thing is true for like all these other habits, right? And so in a sense, habits are the path through which you can reshape your self-image. Because and this is one reason why I believe in small habits. If you say you have a really crazy day at work and you don't have time to do a full workout, well, doing 5 push-ups, it's easy to like dismiss that and be like, well, that's not going to do anything. It doesn't get me in shape. But if you do 5 push-ups, then you cast a vote for the identity of, I'm the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. Even if it wasn't ideal, even if I didn't have much time, even if the best I could do after this 12-hour flight was to do 5 push-ups and then crash in the hotel bed, I still didn't miss a workout. And the cumulative effect of that, of reinforcing your desired identity, I think is really big in the long run. And if it's meaningful, then it actually is big, even if the action is small. And so that's one reason I believe in small habits, is that they are the pathway through which you can like reshape your self-image. And that I think is the real reason habits matter. It's true, habits can help you get in shape or be more productive or reduce stress or make more money. And all those external results are great. But the real thing that they do is they reinforce and embody the identity of the type of person that you want to be. And that I think is worth more than anything else in the long run.
Yeah. Jocko Willink has a famous quote, discipline equals freedom. And when I first heard him say that, I was kind of like, yeah, sure, military man, that kind of thing. And I have this a misconception of what the word discipline means, but it's 100% true, right? And so the more often we get into that, those small habits and their whatever, fill in the blank, right? But it's a decision that you make to do something good for yourself. And it could be anything. It could be saving if you are financially irresponsible and you don't pay bills on time. It could be, I'm going to hit the 5 push-ups like you were talking about. But those build upon themselves. And in that, there is freedom, right? There is a way where you can take a deep breath and be like, I'm on track. I may not be where my goal is right now, but you can look back however long that timeline is, and the evidence has built in the direction you want it to be.
Right. This is one of the most common, criticisms or complaints that people ask me about with habits is like, well, I don't want to be robotic, right? Like, what about like spontaneity? What about the, freedom and doing what I want? I don't want to like pigeonhole myself into this lifestyle. But it's this false dichotomy, because habits don't restrict freedom, they create it. It's often the people who have the worst habits that have the least amount of freedom. It's the people who have terrible financial habits that are always wondering like where the next dollar will come from. Or it's the people who have poor learning habits that are always feeling like they're behind the curve. Or people who have poor fitness habits that are always struggling to find energy. But on the other hand, if you have your habits dialed in, if you have your fitness habits figured out, if you've got your finances handled, then you actually have way more freedom than you did before. Now you actually have the space you have the energy to do what you want. You have the strength to do what you want. You have the financial ability to spend time in areas that you want. And all of that comes from getting your habits handled. So it is a little counterintuitive, this idea that like discipline equals freedom or habits do not restrict freedom, they create it. But it's true that if you can handle that stuff, if the fundamentals of life are dialed in, then you've got space for spontaneity and creativity and freedom and all the other stuff.
Yeah. And I would say, like if you use whatever the goal is and it's more of a broad application, it allows that spontaneity to remain. So like I've had a goal to meditate every day for the entire year. And I haven't done it every day, but I do it a lot of days. And the way that it works for me is that, because I think it was Paul Chek, if you ask Paul Chek, who's health and wellness guru and also very spiritual.
Yeah.
You know, he would say, what if people ask him what's the best form of meditation? It's the one that you'll do every day, right? Because that's the fucking form.
You could say that about habits too. What's the best habit? It's the one that you'll do.
Yeah. And so it's not a matter of like, there's so many fucking forms, right? You've got mindfulness, you've got sit quietly in a room and you know, you can direct intention or any of those things. You've got breath work, you've got Tai Chi, Qigong. I just fucking choose out of the hat based on feel, right? So, I've only got 2 minutes. I'm gonna hit some breath work. I got 10 minutes. Let me go outside, take my shoes off, be in the sun for a minute and do some Qigong.
Yeah.
Or some Tai Chi, right? Or I got 45 minutes and I like to sit for this, you know, so I'll go into a dark, quiet room, maybe throw in some binaural beats and do it that way. It doesn't have to look the same every day, and it doesn't have to be the same exact time every day. Now, those habits can create that space. If I know every morning at 9 a.m., I'm never going to have a meeting here at work, I can get a lot accomplished in that hour,
right?
Then maybe that's the time that works best for me. But point is, it can be a little bit looser and you can kind of draw out of that hat, I'm going to do this. And same thing goes with like movement, which is really what working out is. Your movement practice can be anything. It can be, I didn't get to lift weights today, but I got to do yoga, or I got to do some form of warm up, stretch, cool down. Maybe I just jump on the trampoline for a little bit, right? But if I can check that box off each day, that's what's building. Right?
Yeah. Kudos to you as well for, even though you didn't do it every day, you still keep coming back to it. Because this is a real pitfall for a lot of people with habits, is they have this like all or nothing mentality. They'll like start this diet and then they go binge eat with their friends for, you know, like happy hour or something. And then they're like, oh, well, you know, I blew the diet. Guess I shouldn't even bother. Right. And I think that this is a mantra that I like to keep in mind with habits. The truth is every habit streak is going to end at some point. You know, like when I launched my site, I wrote a new article every Monday and Thursday for 3 years. But then I signed this book deal and I needed to change that. And so that streak ended. And you've probably had a variety of times this year where you've done meditation for 5 days in a row or 7 days in a row or 12 days in a row. But then at some point that streak broke. And the key is never miss twice. You know, like if you can get back on track quickly, then that's a huge win. I've seen this in a lot of areas now as I've started to study people who are like top performers, whether it's sports or business, but it's not that they don't make mistakes. People at the top levels, they make mistakes too, but they just get back on track more quickly. So it's almost never the first mistake that ruins you. It's like the spiral of repeated mistakes that follows. I think in the book, I have a line, something like, missing once is a mistake, missing twice is the start of a new habit. And what you don't want is to start that new habit. You want to never miss twice and just get back on track as quickly as possible. And if you can keep that in mind, it can end up being pretty powerful for consistency. You know, it's like, even if you only did that, if you never missed twice, if you did it and then missed and they're like, well, I'm not going to miss twice. You did it again and then you missed, and then you do it at least 50% of the time. So anyway, yeah, I think that says something about your mentality that you keep coming back to it, even though every now and then it doesn't work out.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that boils down to like self-talk, and I'm not a big self-talk guy. I don't know if you ever remember watching SNL in the 80s and 90s. They had that guy on, and he was talking about, I forget how it went. It was like, and doggone it, people like me.
Oh, yeah,
He'd always be looking in the fucking mirror while he said it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's to that extent, but if your typical mental chatter is, oh, yeah, I knew I was going to fucking eat it. You know, I'm a fat loser and I can't help myself. And the first cupcake that I see, I'm always going to say yes to. And then that spirals into the next day. Oh, man, there's this plate of rice and I can't say no. And then you just beat yourself up over and over again. That talk drives the motor in the engine and steers the ship that direction. Whereas if I fall off like I do, I'm about to start 6 months keto and I'm going to do 60 days of the carnivore diet to kick it off just to be the guinea pig here. And we're going to document it with blood work and everything. You know, in that, there will be a strict period of 60 days. After that, when I go into ketosis, if I'm out to eat and somebody's got gluten-free pizza, I might eat it, but it's not going to be, I eat that. And then the next day, well, I ate carbs last night, so I'm going to eat carbs again. Like, circle back, get back on the horse, you know, and then build that back. And if you do that, it's surprisingly easy, and then it's less constrictive. It's less robotic, and oh, fuck, I can't do that thing, right? I forget which study it was, but it was, said something along the lines, it was a dietary study. If you said, I can't have that food, you were far more likely to eat it than if you said, I don't eat that food.
Yeah, I
right?
wrote
Because
about this one.
That's a decision, right? I think it was in Ferriss's 4-Hour Body.
Yeah, they brought people in. They did this. They had them do like some test that was just fake. It was just they thought that was the actual experiment, but of course, in psychology experiments, it's never the actual experiment. But anyway, as they walked out of the room, they offered them either a chocolate bar or some healthy, healthy snack, a granola bar or something. I don't know. Anyway, but during the test, they had to either repeat phrases or fill out phrases that were like, I don't eat ice cream, or I don't, miss workouts or things like that, or I won't, or I can't. I don't, or I can't. I can't eat ice cream. I can't work out. I can't miss a workout, that kind of thing. And all the people who said I can't, who felt restrictive, were far more likely to opt for the chocolate bar than the people who said I don't, which again comes back to this form of identity. Imagine, this is an example I mentioned in the book. Imagine you have two people who are trying to quit smoking, and you offer both of them a cigarette. And the first person says, oh, no, thanks, I'm trying to quit. And the second person says, oh, no, thanks, I'm not a smoker. Same thing. They're both turning down the cigarette, but the first person still identifies as a smoker. They identify as someone who's trying to do something that isn't them. Whereas the other person signals this shift in identity. Oh, no, thanks, I'm not a smoker. They no longer see themselves in that way. And it's one thing to say, I'm the type of person who wants this. It's another thing to say, I'm the type of person who is this. And in a sense, true behavior change is actually identity change. Because once you believe that that's who you are, you're not even really trying to change your habits anymore. You're just acting in alignment with the type of person you already believe yourself to be. It's like, no, I'm the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. So I'm not like convincing myself to go to the gym. That's just who I am. I just work out, identity change is at the root of pretty much all behavior change.
Yeah. Paul Chek calls that the echo test. Like if you were to stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon and yell, I want to lose 20 pounds and feel great. That's what gets echoed back to you. I want to lose 20 pounds and feel great. And you're always chasing that thing. It's like a carrot that's in front of the horse's mouth. It's always out in front of you. Versus I've lost weight and I feel amazing. And that gets echoed back to you. Now that does seem a little woo-woo. It does seem, but it's the embodiment of that action and belief in yourself that translates to the actual fucking result. It's not, oh, I wish this and it's going to just fall in my lap and I magically lose 20 pounds. There is action necessary for any type of intention made. Right. But when the intention made is there's a belief that this has already happened and I'm already embodying the thing that I want, those seem to turn out better results than the other one.
The thing is, it's not, in a sense, it is kind of woo-woo to say stuff like that. But the point is that we interpret the stimuli and the data, the cues in our life differently based on what our viewpoint is at that time, based on what our personality or our personal viewpoint is, based on what you believe, your self-image. So, you see this all the time with politics. You have the same news story that runs on the TV, but then a liberal and a conservative interpret that data in completely different ways. And it's because of what's getting echoed back to them, because of how they see themselves, because of what filter they're running that data through. And the same thing is true if we're talking about weight loss or whatever else. If you see a particular number on the scale and the thing that's being echoed back to you is, I want to lose 20 pounds and feel great, then suddenly you don't feel good about that number. If the thing that's getting echoed back to you is, I've stuck to workouts for 7 days in a row and I feel more energetic and healthy, then you see the number in a totally different way. Same number, just different interpretation. So I think it's important, but it's not the whole story. And some of the things that also influence things are, like what we talked about, making things obvious and making them easy. But making it satisfying, which is the fourth kind of major lever that I talk about in the book, that's crucial for getting people to come back. And that can come in many different forms. So I guess I'll just lay the context for this real quick. This is really interesting to look at with a lot of products. So chewing gum is a good example. For many years, for hundreds of years, chewing gum was around, but it was like kind of this bland resin. It was just chewy, but it wasn't tasty. And Wrigley launched in like 1880, 1890, and they came out with Juicy Fruit and Spearmint and Double Mint. And suddenly gum was chewy and it had this immediate flavor. There was like this immediate reward to chewing it. And it took off. They became the biggest chewing gum company in the world. And today, many companies are doing the same kind of thing where they're trying to layer in a little bit of extra satisfaction with the product. So a couple of years ago, BMW came out with a car that when you press on the accelerator, it'll pipe extra engine growl through the stereo in the car. So it's like more satisfying to step on the gas. Ford just came up with another one where the engine noise is still there, but they have this valve that it'll only open and let the engine noise into the car interior, and past all the soundproofing if you really slam on the gas and rev the RPMs up. But if you just drive like normal, it'll keep it soft and quiet. And so the point there is that all of those products, cars or chewing gum and many others, they find ways to layer immediate satisfaction into the experience. And when you do that, people want to repeat it more. Anytime you have some kind of enjoyment or a satisfying ending to a behavior, it's like this positive signal in your brain that says, hey, that felt good. You should do this again next time. And that's what really gets a habit to stick. All the other stuff that we talked about, making habits attractive, making them more obvious, making it more convenient to do, that gets a habit to start the first time or makes it easier for you to do it right then. But the only reason you come back to it is because it's satisfying. And it's really about the speed of the satisfaction. And this is something that I call the cardinal rule of behavior change, which is behaviors that are immediately rewarded get repeated, and behaviors that are immediately punished get avoided. And the more that you can have that positive emotional feeling right away, the more reason you have to come back to a habit in the future.
Yeah. And that's absolutely beautiful. And I think that minimum effective dose plays in that reward as well. And so many things we often think, all right, I'm going to start running. And I've done this to myself countless fucking times. But if I just get the minimum effective dose, that might be a 2-mile walk, or it might be a half-mile jog or a 1-mile jog at a snail's pace where I can breathe through my nose the whole time. If I get that endorphin rush and I feel good and it's positive and I'm not too beat up after, I'll circle back. I'll run again that week. But if I go out and crush myself running like a hard 3 miles on concrete or hitting trail, a trail run or sprint repeats up a hill, and I'm fried for the whole week, the odds of me circling back to that the following week, even if it's just once a week, they're pretty slim.
Right.
And then oftentimes when we have this new goal or this new idea of a habit we want to create, we think it's the same all or nothing idea, right? So I got to do what everyone else is doing. My buddy just did 5 miles on Strava, or, you sign up for CrossFit and rather than take the beginner's classes, you're like, I used to lift weights in college. I got this, right?
I played sports. I'll do the intermediate.
Yeah,
I'm good.
Exactly. And you get hopefully you don't get injured from it, but even if you don't want to beat yourself up. You don't want it to be so taxing that you're like, fuck, I'm not doing that again. And then your whole my whole association with running, if that's all I knew was, oh, this kicks my ass, then I may not love it, right? But if I do just that minimum to get that positive response, then I'll always want to come back to that because I know where it is. And then I kind of have this field line where I can say, oh, if I do just enough, I feel good. And if I overdo it, I don't feel good. But if you start with overdoing it, you don't really know where that beautiful sweet spot is.
Satisfaction is just your expectations minus the experience. So, it's like earlier I said perceived value motivates you to act. Actual value motivates you to repeat an experience. And it's really the difference between those two that determines whether it's satisfying or not. If your expectations are sky high, like if you set, I have a friend who's a writer and his goal is to write 1 sentence every day. And it sounds absurd, but if you set the expectation that low, then he can feel successful pretty much every day. He always can feel satisfied by sticking to the habit, which gives him a reason to come back again the next day. And sometimes he writes a full page and sometimes it's just a sentence. But if he had set a goal of writing 1,000 words a day, there would be some days where he couldn't do that. And then suddenly he's feeling bad about that. What if he wrote 1 sentence that day? He would feel bad about it, even though he still wrote that day, but it's just because of his expectation. So there's a little bit of mental play that's going on there in how we sabotage ourselves by setting the bar so high. That's especially true in the beginning. I think that it becomes less true for maybe the 1 or 2 areas where you really want to be a master in life. Like if something's really important to you and you want peak performance, you want to be a professional athlete, you want to be, among the best authors or something like that, then maybe your strategy needs to change. But for most people, most of the time, the strategy is probably better to set the bar low, find a way to be satisfied and show up each day. And then once you've built the habit, then you optimize from there. This is, I had a reader who ended up losing over 100 pounds. And one of the things that he did was he went to the gym, but he wasn't allowed to stay for longer than 5 minutes. And so it sounds so weird because it's a complete opposite of what most people do to build a habit. But what he was doing was he was mastering the art of showing up. And so For 6 weeks, he went to the gym. He'd go in, do like half an exercise, and then 5 minutes would be up and he'd go home. And eventually he got to the point where he was like, I'm coming here all the time. I kind of feel like staying longer, right? But that's the opposite of the person who takes the intermediate CrossFit class and like kills themselves for 3 weeks and then it feels totally fried and, gives up. And then 3 months later, they're like, oh, I got to get back in shape. And so a habit must be established before it can be improved, right? Often we optimize for the finish line. We think about the outcome that we want. We think about like, oh, I want to lose 20 pounds or I want to earn 6 figures this year or whatever the thing is. But instead, if you just focus on the first 2 minutes of a behavior, or in this guy's case, the first 5 minutes of the behavior, and you optimize for the starting line, you master the art of showing up, but then you have options. Then you actually have something that you can improve. If you're not the type of person who shows up at the gym, even if it's just for 5 minutes, it doesn't even matter what your ideal workout plan is or whatever. Like you can't do anything because you're not there. And so in that sense, I think that it's often helpful for people, especially in the beginning, to scale a habit down to the first 2 minutes, master the art of showing up, and then once you're the type of person who does it every day, figure out a way to improve.
I love it, man. There's a quote that we grew up hearing saying, shoot for the stars and you'll land on the moon. And that would work if the goal was just to get out of the Earth's atmosphere, right? But so often as humans, we would make it to the moon and be like, fuck the moon. I wanted to go to the stars. Like, fuck this place. I didn't want to go here, right? There's no satisfaction in that. If your aim was for the stars, that's what that really looks like, right? If your goal is to lose 20 pounds and you only lost 10, you might be pissed and throw in the towel because you set that in a finite timeline, as opposed to my goal is health.
Right.
And I'll take the 20-pound loss whenever it fucking happens. Or maybe I gained muscle and I only lost 10 pounds overall and I didn't realize that I had lost the 20 pounds of fat and just gained 10 pounds of muscle, right? I think Dan John, who's a famous strength coach, said, just show up. Yeah. That was his number one piece of advice for anyone he was training. Just show up. You're tired, you're beat up, you don't want to lift that day, just fucking show up. And if you do that, then you can work on the things that are going to help you get better. Maybe it's just a mobility day. Maybe you're just going to foam roll and stretch for a little bit and get a little sweat on the treadmill and call it. That's fine, right? It doesn't have to be, I'm going to crush myself every single day.
I've worked with this really great powerlifting coach for the last couple months, and it's been great. My programming's been more dialed in. I've had somebody who can pay attention to, all the little mistakes that I'm making that I would otherwise overlook. And I've made progress, and that's been nice. But after training for a decade now, what I've realized is that the biggest thing is just get in the gym and don't miss reps. Like put your reps in. If you do that, then the actual program that you're on, it might help you a little bit in the short run. And maybe if it's really dialed in, you got a great coach, then it could help you in the long run too, a little bit. Maybe your peak would be a little higher. But if you just put your reps in and don't miss workouts, and you do that for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, I don't know, how far would you get as long as you're doing a reasonable program? Probably pretty far. Even if you don't have the best coach, you probably get 95% of your potential out. And I think a lot of times, this is true not just for habits, but like any kind of endeavor that people go into, they try to optimize the things that make like the last 2% of difference. Like people want to get in shape and they're like, what knee sleeves do I need? What's the best protein powder? What workout shoes should I buy? What running
Olympic shoes should I
right?
lift in? Yeah.
And it's like, dude, just don't miss workouts for 2 years and then get back to me. That's the thing that makes 98% of the difference is, are you putting your reps in? And it can be easy to lose sight of that. And the fundamentals also are like the least sexy part of the process. And so it's easy to kind of take your eye off the ball in that sense. But you always have to bring yourself back to that, because habits are the foundation for mastery. You cannot master any particular area without having mastered the fundamentals of it. Like take chess. You need to know how all the pieces move automatically, without having to think about it, before you can start thinking about strategy and like, okay, I'm going to make this move, then they're going to do this, then I'll do that. Like you don't have the mental space for that if you don't even know where the pieces go, and you can't do that on autopilot. Same thing is true for, basketball. Like you need to know how to dribble with both your dominant and non-dominant hand before you start worrying about offensive sets and like defensive schemes and what kind of move you should make based on this defender's position and all this other stuff. And it's really, in many cases, it's the people who have habitualized more of the experience that have the mental capacity to focus on the next level. I remember reading, I don't know much about the martial arts personally, but I remember reading about Josh Waitzkin in his book, The Art of Learning. And he talks about doing Thai push hands. And he had practiced the moves so much that while he was grappling with an opponent, he could feel where their weight was shifting and know exactly where to throw. But because he was grappling with people who were also really good, they knew that too. And so the way that he found an advantage was by habitualizing so much of that, by internalizing it so well, that he would just pay attention to their eyes. And when they got ready to blink is when he would make his throw. And for people who have never done martial arts, that sounds absurd to me. Like how could you be in the middle of wrestling with somebody and have enough attention to think about when someone's about to blink? But the answer is you need to habitualize all the fundamentals, and then you have the mental space open for that kind of mastery. And I think that's true for pretty much any area. So the more you habitualize the easy stuff, then you can start to worry about what knee sleeves to wear and what protein powder and what weightlifting shoes and all the extra stuff. And probably other things that actually make more of a difference, like where are my hips located on this squat or something like that.
Yeah. So much of this stuff, whatever the goal is or the thing that we're trying to attain, we want it right now. That's the culture we live in. And I want it fast. I don't want to have to wait it out. I don't want to have to pay my dues and really stick with this thing for a long time. But all mastery takes a long time. And I think it helps if people really look at this as a marathon, whatever their goal is, look at it as a marathon instead of a sprint.
In the book, I talk about this idea that I call the plateau of latent potential. And basically it's this concept that a lot of the time when we try to make change, we do exactly what you just said. We want results quickly. And we also, in our mind, we envision that it's going to be kind of this like linear experience. I'll put in a little bit of work and then I'll get a little bit of results. So if I put a lot of work in, then I'll get a lot of results. We think it's going to be this like straight line. But actually, in many cases, the process of improvement it's more like this hockey stick curve where there's like this valley of death in the beginning. You don't see anything. And then all the returns are delayed. So I compare it to the process like heating up an ice cube. So say you have like an ice cube sitting on the table. It's cold. It's like 25 degrees. You can see your breath. You start to heat the room up, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Still ice cube sitting there, 31. And then you get to 32 degrees and suddenly the ice cube melts. And it's a 1 degree shift, no different than all the other shifts that came before it. But suddenly you get this phase transition. And the process of mastering an area of improvement is often like that. And people will put in work for 3 months or 6 months or whatever and complain about not getting results, which is kind of like heating an ice cube from 25 to 31 degrees and complaining about it not melting. The work was not wasted. It's just being stored. And so you just need to keep showing up until you hit that phase transition and all that is released and you finally reach that point. But people aren't patient. They want things to happen right now. And so then they're like, well, I don't want to heat an ice cube from 25 to 28 degrees. Like that's just boring. It's wasting my time. It's still sitting there. Nothing's changed. The San Antonio Spurs have this great quote that hangs in the locker room that says, whenever I feel, it's something to the effect of, whenever I feel down or whenever I feel like I'm not working hard enough, I think about the stone cutter who's been pounding on a rock 100 times without it breaking. And then on the 101st blow, it splits in two. And I know that it wasn't the 101st that did it, but all the 100 that came before. And that's like the real idea behind any of this work. People want to crack a rock once and have it split. It's like, no, you need to show up another 100 times. And if you're impatient about that, then mastery is never going to come. And in that sense, mastery is often like a goalless process. It's not about getting the rock to split in two. It's about showing up and like taking good swings. It's not about getting the ice cube to melt. It's about showing up and making a 1 degree shift each day. And if you can embrace that idea, then the results come naturally.
Fuck yeah, brother. This has been an excellent hour with you. Where can people find you online? You have an amazing Twitter account.
Thanks, dude.
Website,
Yeah, so
all that stuff.
I've just finished this book called Atomic Habits. It talks about a lot of the things we talked about today, but in much more depth. And you can find that at atomichabits.com. The book is there, but I also have a couple extra bonuses as well. There's like a secret chapter that isn't included in the book. There are some bonus guides on how to apply the ideas to business or how to apply the ideas to parenting. Anyway, all that stuff is at atomichabits.com. And then if you just want to poke around and see my other work, you can go to jamesclear.com, see my articles there. I've got links to Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, and all that stuff. So yeah, thanks, man.
Awesome, brother. Yeah, we'll include it in the show notes. Thank you very much.
Cool.